welcome back to my podcast with Pondering That with Saffron King. I'm Saffron, I'm the host, and today we're with a very, very special guest, Emma Norry, who is a writer of fiction and non-fiction. She has written, and I'm not even just limiting it to these books, but she's written A Victorian Story, The Place for Me, stories about the Windrush generation, football legends, Mary Prince, Home Again, and her latest release, Fable House. But if you check her out, guys, she's done so much more than that. I just had to condense it a bit. And not to forget, in 2022, Emma was also a writer on Eastenders, where she wrote her own episode. So we're here with a very renowned writer who knows what she's doing. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
That's all right. Thank you for inviting me, Saffron. I'm good today. I am very hot. I mean, I'm glad to see the sunshine, but I'm like sweltering. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm so, and it's actually early. Like our interview is actually early, and it's still we're already hot already. So, oh gosh. So, Emma, what was your inspiration behind Fable House?
So Fable House actually came to me from someone else.
Wow.
Um, and I love a collaboration anyway. So there's a woman called Jasmine Richards who everyone should look up. She's very inspirational. She's a Black woman who has worked in children's publishing for about 15 years. And before she was in children's publishing, she went to Oxford, she went to Oxford University. Um, she has been an editor. And 4 years ago, she was looking for books for her son, who was around 8 at the time, I think. And she kept going into bookshops and she couldn't see any books with Black and brown kids on the cover. She couldn't see any stories where her son was represented. Um, and I'm just so in awe of her, really, because instead of being, you can moan about that and you can kind of say, oh, this country and whatever. And, obviously America does brilliant, diverse fiction. But Jasmine just thought, I can't find anything. So I'm going to start my own company that produces stuff that's diverse. So she launched a company called Story Mix. And the whole idea behind her company is to make Black and brown children, the heroes of their own story. So she'd started this company, which in the wake of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd has become really, really busy. And in February 21, she emailed me and said, would I be interested in this project? So I'd met Jasmine once before on a writer's weekend, and she'd read some of my work and she knew a bit about my background. I grew up in care. So she came to me with this project, which was for children who, live in care home. They find a Black knight, and it's set in the 1950s. And it's based on some real history that I knew nothing about, and that Jasmine had done some research on. So once I kind of heard more about the history, which is basically Black GIs in the Second World War had beautiful brown babies with some white women. And because of the segregation laws at the time, the US Army wouldn't let the Black GIs marry their white girlfriends. I mean, not all the relationships were boyfriend, girlfriend. Obviously, there were a lot of white women who were married, and their husbands were away. But in the kind of after the Second World War, Britain, especially rural Britain, was still very racist. I think there was something like 2,000 babies born during 1943 and 1946,
Wow.
and 1,000 of them ended up in orphanages. So Jasmine had found this research. There's a book called Britain's Brown Babies by a woman called Lucy Bland, and she kind of wanted to incorporate and weave in some of that history into a fictional magical adventure story for kids. So that's how the project came onto my radar. So the idea was someone else's, and then it was kind of my job and privilege to kind of make it my own, really.
Amazing. And what was the writing process like? So when you were actually writing it, and obviously, as you mentioned, you grew up in care as well. Did it bring up a few personal memories of what you went through as well?
Yeah. So the great thing about when I started off wanting to write, I wanted to write in
Mhm.
film and TV, or TV specifically. Um, and I hadn't kind of considered books as an option, although I'd always written stories. But I kind of knew that I really enjoyed character and dialogue was the thing that I just, loved more than anything else. I wasn't someone that was very descriptive, for example. So what was fantastic working with someone else was that Jasmine wrote the plot. She had worked out what happens. I mean, it changed and developed along the way. So, there were whole chapters where she'd sort of written about half a page about, so and so does this, and then they find this, and then this happens. And I might write that out, and then we would discover that it wouldn't work, that my style was a bit, earnest or whatever, and I couldn't do certain things very well, or as the characters became more alive, those actions wouldn't suit the character. But in the first instance, she'd written out the plot for me. And the idea is that I kind of thought, or I imagined that because it was someone else's idea, I could have a certain distance from it. But I started writing it. So in the very first instance, Jasmine wanted me to do some sample chapters, right? So, a publisher hasn't picked up this book yet. This is just an idea that Jasmine's had, and she wants me to see if I can write it. So she asked me to do 3 sample chapters. So that's kind of, 3 chapters or around 8 to 10,000 words. She told me what she wanted me to, what to happen. And I went away and wrote it. But I started writing it in the first person. So and then it just kind of poured out of me. And then because it was in the first person, it just became really personal. Jasmine had wanted it in the third person, kind of magical adventure, fantasy, kids books, Harry Potter and the like. They're in the third person normally, because it's easier actually to write things like action scenes. If Harry does this or whatever, rather than because obviously it's only limited to what one person can see. But the minute I kind of knew about the project, it could only come out one way, really. And it was really personal. So her Jasmine sample was just, chapter 1 was kind of like, introduce us to the characters, make it clear that Heather doesn't really want to be in this children's home. But that's, it's very general. And when I started writing it and I was thinking about my own experience in the kids' home, in the 70s and 80s, no one had a clue what to do with Afro hair. And we just used to spend our time running away from those horrible metal Afro combs that would make my head kind of make my head bleed. So I had an image in my head of like a 10, 11-year-old just running away from a white nursery nurse who was determined to make her look respectable. And it ended up becoming really personal, actually. But also I had a nice, not barrier, but a kind of nice protective mechanism, the fact that it was set, in the 1950s. And even though I could include some of my own experiences, this child isn't me, or, wasn't me. But I think anyone who does anything creative, you can't help but put in some of you, whether you're doing it or not, really.
Absolutely, it just naturally comes out, doesn't it? Because I suppose the creative industry is so personal. Even if you're writing about someone in a completely different, who's got a different experience to you, comes from a different class, you still pour a bit of yourself into it. You can't help it, you know what I mean? But no,
and that's what we connect with, I think, as well as other humans. That's what, if you think about the really successful stories, or the really most successful TV shows and films and things like that, they all speak to a certain human experience that we can all identify with, and that's why they're so popular, is because we can all kind of see elements of life and ourselves in them, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Emma. So, Emma, you spoke about that you were brought up in care. What would you say, what was your experience like growing up in care?
So I was put into care from when I was about 16 months old until I chose to leave a foster home and live on my own, age 17. So, I mean, there's a few things to say, really. One of those things is because it was from when I was so young, it was kind of all I knew, really. And I think if any of us consider our childhoods, whatever we're used to, we just think that's how things are. That's, you accept it, the good, the bad, the ugly, that you just think that's how things are. And it isn't really until we're like probably like 10, 11, 12 that we act, and start maybe going to other people's houses, or it's just then that we might start recognizing that what we're experiencing, isn't normal or is slightly different, or, our parents or our caregivers do XYZ, and then questioning it, why does so-and-so live in a bigger house, or why does so-and-so have toilets, or whatever it is. So because a lot of people, when I mention that, instantly feel kind of sympathy. It's usually sympathy as opposed to empathy. And their first reaction is, that must have been terrible, or, that's dreadful. And for the most part, it wasn't really. I mean, there were some horrible experiences. There were some foster parents who never should have been allowed to foster, whose motives and reasons for wanting to foster children are questionable at best. But I think actually it's given me so many different experiences and so many windows into examples of how families are different and how families can operate. But yeah, I mean, it was hard. And I'm going to be, it's my birthday tomorrow. I'm going to be 48 tomorrow. I
Oh,
literally
happy
forgot.
birthday for tomorrow. Oh my gosh, wow.
I love a birthday.
Oh.
I'm yeah, so, and I'm kind of really, it's only really in the last 5 or 6 years that I've kind of really realized and recognized the impact of my background, how it's impacted me on a deeply emotional level, really. I've always been really open about kind of what happened, all my circumstances. I don't think it helps anyone to conceal basic information. I think people with care experienced, or drug addiction, or any kind of addiction problems in their family, I don't think shame helps anyone. I don't think it helps us be closer to one another. I don't think it helps us to connect. And I don't think it's up to us to shoulder that burden of something alone, when for the most part, if we have had a difficult or challenging childhood, or any kind of element of trauma, usually, it's not a child's fault. And too often we can internalize that and think it is our fault. And that, then you spend your life trying to prove something to somebody for no reason, or trying to be loved, or looking for all sorts of things in the wrong places, really. So yeah, I mean, it was, it was interesting, I think, from being really little. My main quality was kind of curiosity, really. And I don't know, you can argue about the whole nature nurture debate. I don't know where that came from. I think our brains and our spirit are extremely powerful, and usually what you're trying to do, mind, body, spirit, what you're trying to do the whole time is protect yourself. You're trying to protect yourself. So I guess maybe my curiosity developed as a protective mechanism, as a, holy moly, you're in this situation. One way of being able to process it is to just see it as a massive adventure. So yeah, I know, but, and also just it was all I knew. So if anything, when I was kind of like 11, and I moved from a city, so I was born in Cardiff, Wales, and I was fostered in 2 or 3 different foster homes, and also a children's home, a big residential children's home there. But Cardiff and Wales were the first 10 years of my life. And then I moved to a tiny, tiny village in Suffolk, like really tiny, really rural. And if anything, that was I was really confused by that. I kind of didn't, change was what I was used to. So that idea of being in one place, with one family, was kind of really mysterious to me. Like, why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone want to be in one place? Yeah. And it's interesting now, kind of being older and looking back on stuff, because usually I'm someone that doesn't look back on anything. Like, my best friend, when we meet a couple of times a year, she always wants to reminisce about what we did um at school, and I never remember it. I'm like, did that really happen? I mean, I can be nostalgic, but I don't ever look back. There's kind of no point. It's done. But writing Fable House, I've had to really, in interviews and just generally, I've had to really examine, my own childhood. And it's kind of interesting, I think, our childhoods. It is, isn't it? They do say that whole give me a boy at 7 and I'll show you the man or whatever. And it's, your first 10, 12 years, that's how we're learning who we are. And that's kind of
Absolutely. And Emma, you're such an inspiration, and I know other people watching this will agree. Like, you've rose up against all the odds, and you've used your experiences to your advantage as well. And I think as well, as children, we're so creative, and sometimes as well when we go into our creative zone and in our fantasy world, that we're able to escape traumas that we've been through and make it, like you said, an adventure. And I think that's very beautiful. And so what would you say to someone who is currently in care or has been in care, who wants to really venture out and be a writer, but they're struggling to believe in themselves, or they think they don't really have a story, or they don't have the right connections to get into writing? What would you say to them?
It can be a lifelong process to learn to believe in yourself and feel like you are good enough and that you belong.
Yes.
But I would say to anyone, but anyone, especially children in care, if you're in care, a lot of the time people will underestimate you or write you off. So, if you've come from generations of, abuse, addiction, whatever, you can kind of be tarred with the same brush sometimes. The statistics for children in care going on to university, for example, are really, really low. And that kind of support isn't always there. At the moment, nowadays, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of grants, kind of business grants and mentoring opportunities. And I would encourage anyone in care that's of an age where they can access those sorts of schemes to really, really go for it. And there's lots of organizations. I was involved with Coram Voice for a while, where they do a creative writing competition for care leavers. And there's those kinds of opportunities. There's those kind of competitions, and get involved with kind of Bernardo's and charities and things like that. But I would say to people, creativity is within all of us. Yeah, like to be human is to be a creator. To be human is to be creative. And there is no other you. Like, if you're an identical twin, triplet, whatever, there is no other you. And how you experience the world is unique. You need to be creative for yourself first. So, you're not in control of what happens with your creativity. Someone might think they want to publish a book. Someone might think you can act. Someone might think you can sing. Someone might think it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, really. It really doesn't. Your relationship and connection with your own creativity is about you expressing yourself, because we all know how difficult it is if everything's kept inside, right? I mean, everything, like emotions that are massive, thoughts that are, ruminating, going over and over the same things, anxieties. But if something's outside of yourself, you get to see it with a kind of more dispassionate eye, and you get to kind of really examine it for what it is. So, and being creative isn't necessarily about writing, or isn't necessarily about, I think we're all made of stories. We tell each other stories all the time. We tell everything. And even when we're relating what's happened with someone, or who said what, or gossip, or a joke, they're all stories. They're all, beginning, middle, and end. But there's loads of different ways people can, go about stuff. So there's journaling, there's, writing a diary, writing what happened to you, or writing, you don't need to write about any events. You can just write about how you feel. A lot of my early stuff was kind of conversations. So, I might have a terrible day at school, or things wouldn't go the way I would have liked them to have gone. So when I came home, I would, rewrite my day, how I wish it had gone, how I'd said all the cool stuff, or had the great comeback. But I wasn't writing stories, I was just writing conversations, kind of rewriting my own history. So I think it's finding out what you enjoy. So, finding out what you like to do in your downtime. So if you're someone that loves to watch soap operas, maybe you could take your favorite characters and write a little scene about, really examine what you're watching. Do you think they did that storyline well? What do you think would have made it better? What were your favorite bits? If you're someone that likes a certain genre of film, you love horror films or you love sci-fi. I never wrote fan fiction because I didn't really know it existed, but I would say that's a really good starting point for someone if they're a bit like, I don't trust my own voice or I don't trust my own story. Then take your favorite characters and write some stuff about them, possibly. And that whole connections thing. So many creative industries really do look really, they look so closed from the outside because they kind of are. And I think it's just that thing of all you can do is treat people how you would like to be treated. And I'm here with you today because you were kind enough to kind of be with me on that Eastenders day, and you were absolutely lovely to speak to. We were both really open. I was really excited. You had a great energy. I didn't know we'd be here today, like me published a book.
I know.
We were just two humans making a connection. And if you can kind of let go of fear, there's so much fear around, I'm not good enough, or they're better than me, or they, status and all that kind of rubbish. If you can let go of all of that and just see a human in front of you, if there's a real connection to be made, you will make it with each other. And then who knows when and if your paths might cross again. And if there are lots of doors closed to you and lots of people, lauding it about, or status, or, excluding you from cliques because you're not the right class or the right race or the right background, I think it's always really useful to just tell yourself that it's that thing they say, isn't it, when you're nervous, like, if you look out to a crowd and just imagine everyone on the toilet, they say kids. I wouldn't want to be imagining that, but I know.
I never heard that one.
They used to say that at school, like, if you're nervous, just look out to the crowd and imagine everyone on the loo, and you're like, no, not. But the idea behind it is that thing of, when it boils down to it, apart from, privilege, status, whatever, but we all are human. We all came into this world, and we will all be going out of this world, and just treat each other with respect and a bit of kindness, because neither costs you anything.
Absolutely.
So and it's that thing of, you never know what anyone else has been through. I've had people like you just don't know anyone else's circumstances. So you have to come from a place of kindness and curiosity. I think.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, that is beautiful. And I like how you said, you don't know what someone else has been through, because sometimes we can go in situations and think, oh, people have had a perfect life, or I've been through this, or I'm messy. But actually, sometimes people just cover up what they've been through and just keep going forward. And it's just like you said, just knowing that, you've got the sauce too, you've got the juice, you've got the creativity, and we're all human. So exactly. What would you say is the most fulfilling part about being a writer?
Everything I'm doing at the minute isn't, kind of wasn't planned, or, I am slightly in awe of those people that are like, I've got a goal and I've got a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. I wouldn't be able to live my life like that. First of all, I'm too disorganized, like, and also I'm kind of, my habit, I'm interested in loads of different things. And it is a bit of that thing of, if you don't expect anything, you can't be disappointed, which doesn't mean I don't hope for stuff. It just means I'm super flexible if things don't go a certain way. So, I'm absolutely over it sounds a bit simplistic, but I'm absolutely over the moon that I've been paid for making stuff up. Like,
yeah.
best thing ever. Like someone's paying me to just make stuff up.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really fulfilling. I mean, at the minute, what's the most fulfilling is something that I didn't even bring into it. So I know I didn't start off being a writer for children. But Fable House and the work that I'm published in is for children. It's for 8 to 13-year-olds.
Mm.
And at the moment, I'm doing quite a few school visits, which I'm not a public speaker. I get incredibly nervous. I'm kind of like empathy overload. So my first school visit, I literally had to hide my face because I was crying. Like
Oh.
I just get touched really easily. I'm very emotional. So I don't, and also I don't always trust myself not to swear. Like I'm just paranoid that I'm going to say the wrong thing in front of like 48-year-olds, right? Like, because I'm really unfiltered. I don't really plan like what I'm saying. I just get really terrified. Um, but I've done a few now, not loads, still on, on the fingers of two hands or whatever. But I did a school visit yesterday, and especially seeing black and brown kids, but just kids generally. I mean, there were these 2 year 4 kids in the front row who just clutched their hands throughout my whole talk, and they were beaming their heads off. Like, the year 6s and the year 7s, they can be like a bit judgy and, be looking at me and they're making faces and they're mocking. I could tell, they're like, we were all teenagers, right? But when the younger ones they're just grinning at you and they're so excited that you're talking to them and you're telling them that they are creative, that they matter, that we want to hear your stories. And it's just the best thing. Like, it's the best thing. And when a girl came up to me yesterday and she's like, oh, so you don't know who, because I don't know who my dad is, but my mum reckons he was from Jamaica, but that's that's what the most I know about my cultural identity. But a little girl came up to me yesterday and she's like, I'm from Jamaica, my favorite food's plantain. Have you tried curry? And I'm like, oh yeah, I love a goat curry. And her eyes and just her whole spirit just coming up to me and being really excited that there are, this girl in my book is, mixed race and she's a heroine, and it's really fulfilling, like to see. And afterwards, like making a proper connection with these kids, like when they sign a book, it's just adorable. Like it's amazing. I love it.
Oh, Emma, thank you so much for sharing that, Emma. Like, honestly, you've really given us a lot of food to think about, food for thought, inspiration, and just and you know what? I'd never think that you were nervous to speak publicly, because even though, yes, you might not say a podcast is public speaking, but it is, and you don't come across as nervous. You haven't swore once as well. Like, you've just been very authentic and just yourself. So where can we find you on social media? What are your handles, Emma?
Yeah, okay. Let's get down to business, right?
Yeah.
I'm rubbish at socials. Well, I love Twitter. I know it's a dying art and probably everyone younger and cooler has moved on, but I really like it because words are my jam. So I'm on, I think it's EL Norry. See, I'm rubbish. I'm gonna actually have to
No,
look at it.
don't worry, because I will also put your. Don't worry, I'll also put the
Okay.
actual at underneath your name as well.
Great. Yeah, like it's EL Norry underscore writer, I think. And Fable House. Yeah, no, I love this book. So that's out now. That came out last week. And I'm on Instagram under the same handle. But I'm not very good at Instagram. I think I posted a reel and a story once, and it was literally the same thing 4 times, just with different typos.
Oh, well, you know what? You're still posting. You're posting content, and that's the main thing. And also, you've got a website, haven't you?
Yes, I have got a website, yeah, eelnorry.com, which I think needs a bit of a
Amazing.
revamp. But that's up and running. So I can be found around on the Tinternet.
Yes,
Yeah, and I'm always happy,
exactly.
for people to chat to me. I do a bit of I'm always kind of, you only anyone who kind of wants any advice or writing, I always really like sharing my time and anything like that I can offer. Prospective writers, especially writers of color. Jasmine at Story Mix, she's always looking for writers. If people have always wanted to write but might not have the time or work, I mean, I, have a day job. She is a really good person to collaborate with because that's a great leg up. Like, she'll give you the idea to see if you can write. And there's lots of kind of mentoring and, you know, all sorts of kind of schemes that I'm involved with that help people who are interested in creative writing.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Emma. Thank you for your lovely time today. So you heard her, guys, and you can see this beautiful lady who is an inspiration to me, and I'm sure she's an inspiration to you as well. So thank you for listening, guys. So you can stay tuned with us on Instagram at _ ponder on that with Saffron on Instagram, and also on YouTube, ponder on that with Saffron King. So thank you guys for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.